Great.
All right, cool. Like Mr. David Lee said, my name is Javon Norris. Glad to be here talking about cybersecurity stuff again, as it's a learning opportunity for the individuals who maybe join us. It's also one for me so that I can keep my skills fresh. So it's a win-win situation. Actually, one second, I need to just do that. There we go. All right, yeah, I have a part-time job as the nights and weekends instructor for Code Fellows, the cyber ops program. Daytime, I'm what they call a network security specialist or cybersecurity specialist. I've worn many hats throughout my short career thus far. I've only been in the industry about 2012, 2013, lots of ups and downs. But I make it my goal to continue to try and learn new stuff and continue to do more things that will build on my skill set. And I found this new, I wouldn't say a hobby, but maybe it's a passion, helping other people understand stuff related to this industry because it's all around us. We use it in our jobs, we use it in our personal life, and a wise person once told me that either you learn how to do something or you pay somebody else to do it. And that applies to a lot of things, right? But this one in particular, uh, this field in particular really just kind of stuck out to me more than anything because I grew up playing a lot of video games. And when you're a young kid, right, you think that, yeah, I like playing video games. Maybe I can design video games one day. So that's kind of how my journey started. I've never designed any video games, thank goodness. It wouldn't be anything that anybody would want to play if I had. But with that said, my background really primarily is in system administration, making sure that things work and function the way that they're supposed to, and the operations part of the business as well. And then just put like a cybersecurity cap on top of all that, because that's where I'm at right now. I have some formal education as well. I'm an undergraduate in IT and a master's degree in cybersecurity from DePaul University in Chicago. It's a 2-year program. If you enjoy a lot of hands-on stuff and want a comprehensive program, that may be a good one for you. But again, it's like 2 years long, so it's a marathon on that one. But first, a story. I'm a big Lord of the Rings fan, so this image here was a part of my template working on this slide deck, so I left it here. But anyway, once upon a time, there was a large company that suffered a huge breach that affected millions and millions of its customers. But that hardly is a story, right? Because there's truth to that, and not even a company, many companies, high profile companies, from tech companies, e-commerce companies, you name it, have suffered major breaches, which for the most part could have been prevented. Some maybe not so much, but what we're here talking about today is the stuff that could have been prevented, breaches that may have been prevented, or at least mitigated the damage portion by using something like an intrusion detection or an intrusion prevention system. So what does that mean? What does that mean? Intrusion detection, intrusion prevention. So I'm going to answer that question. I'm also going to add why the industry uses intrusion detection / intrusion prevention systems, why you may want to try one yourself, because I know that the demo that I will show you later in this presentation is something that I've implemented in my own home personal network as well. Testing first, right? You test something before you put it into production. That's the way that it works. So yeah, we'll talk about that. And then I'll kind of talk about different ways that you can use it as well. I'm only going to demo one specific type of way to use it, sort of an easy mode, graphical user interface based instead of command line. But I'll kind of just talk to some of the command line stuff itself, but I won't be really demoing the use of it. All right, so why use an intrusion detection system? Well, let's talk about some statistics first. I was talking about breaches not too long ago. Pulled up some data here. Average time to identify a breach was 207 days in 2020. So what does that mean? Well, it means that once a bad guy was able to infiltrate a network, the detection, identification, confirmation of the breach took some crazy amount of time, right? Because when you're talking about things like breaches or intrusions, there's a process or a methodology that needs to be followed. And that really starts with identification, because if you don't know what you're looking for, you can't really classify it as something. So identification of a breach or intrusion is almost as important as the detection portion, right? Because if you falsely or incorrectly identify something repeatedly, well, that's what we call false positives. And at a large scale, false positives can be really, really resource intensive and really noisy. But false positives are not worse than something called false negatives. That is something that you've maybe identified as not a threat, but it actually is. In any case, 200 days, 207 days, 200 days, 100 days, 30 days is not a very good metric when we're talking about identification of breaches, because if it takes you that long to just identify a breach, well, what comes after the identification process? You have to start doing things like mitigation, reducing the damage that will happen if you do nothing, as an example. So there's an entire process that is associated with intrusion detection, and part of the, I guess you could say, the system, the technical control portion that assists with intrusion detection and prevention is what we call intrusion detection or intrusion prevention systems. So I put another statistic up here, monetary statistic, right? So this is just average cost of a breach. So we're taking this average, it's got some sample data in there where the cost of the breach was probably hundreds of millions, and then the other ones were maybe a few 100,000. So it averages out. In any case, 3.86 million, nearly 4 million is a lot of money to lose for a company for something like a breach. And money is not the only thing that an organization has to lose when we're talking about breaches. What do I mean? Okay, so money, right? What about reputation? Your company is on the news. They're getting bashed on the news because they didn't have adequate security controls to prevent a breach on their network. It could have been something simple that they just got negligent or lazy about. That's on the news now. Now the customers don't want to do business with them. Their customers have lost confidence in the business's ability to protect their data. You may be able to put a price on that, but the price associated with that is probably worse than the actual monetary value. So we've got monetary value, we have reputation, and what's the third of this three-headed dragon is probably related to laws, regulatory types of laws, civil, regulatory, even maybe criminal. So what I mean is certain organizations, like if we're talking about payment card industry or the health industry as an example, have mandates on protection of covered information related to people's health or related to people's payment information. And if breaches occur for this specific types of information, you are not only talking about monetary, you're probably talking about reputation, and you're talking about Uncle Sam, which is the government. So being able to manage and handle breaches in a layered approach is going to be the best way. What do I mean? So an intrusion detection or intrusion prevention system alone is not going to be the end all be all solution to help reduce the impact of a breach or prevent a breach altogether. It's a term, layered security, defense in depth. Essentially what it is you apply as many security controls as appropriate, right? Thinking about cost and resources to your organization as possible in a layered approach. You don't rely on any one solution to solve your security problems. Intrusion prevention, intrusion detection systems, IPS, IDS, is going to be one of the things that will help an organization in its layered defense approach. So I've said a lot of stuff up to this point. So why use an intrusion detection system? Well, it can integrate with an organization's existing controls. This is important because when an organization is considering adding things like new software or technical controls to their business to increase their security posture or reduce risk, they have to take into account what they already have and what they already have, what will be affected if they bring in something new. This is the business side of things. It's extremely important because if it's going to cost a business an arm and a leg, or if it's going to add a ton of overhead for them to manage bringing in a new thing like intrusion prevention, intrusion prevention, or intrusion detection system, the reward may not exceed the you know what I'm trying to say, the getting the system may not be as valuable as it seems to be. But it can integrate with existing controls because there are a lot of different ways to deploy IDS, IPS. You can do host-based. Essentially what it means is you can apply this system to detect it directly on an endpoint or network-based. Essentially, it's watching over the entire network as you've configured it to do so. So I've got some images up here. I have a Rottweiler, so that's why I have a picture of a Rottweiler up here. But intrusion detection system, you have a dog in your house, right? Somebody the Amazon person, the mail guy comes to your door, the dog barks at the door. He's detected that something is there. He's alerting you that it's there. Probably the easiest way to imagine how an intrusion detection system can work outside of speaking anything technical is an alarm, some sort, to detect activity that you have configured it to detect. Dogs are natural intrusion detection systems and intrusion prevention systems, depending on the size dog you have. That's why I have a Rottweiler. But she's a sweetheart. She's such a big baby. It's a big guppy. Anyway, they help identify things in real time. Well, real time, what does it mean? Okay, so you could have some type of security software that will detect stuff, but it might send it to like a log that you have to analyze later. Real time is when it finds it, you're going to get alert about it in real time. That's important because time is of the essence when we're talking about breaches. And highly customizable. This is also important when we're talking about the business side of things because not all businesses are the same. Like I said, some businesses deal with health, some businesses deal with payment stuff, some businesses deal with e-commerce, business deal with all kinds of stuff around all kinds of stuff, anything you can think of. So a security control or solution needs to be able to customize to what the business needs and meet the business requirements as well. So IDS can do that for you as well. Also ring cameras, right? Everybody's got ring cameras. I also have ring cameras too. It detects motion. What do? You get a buzz on your phone. Same concept is there. All right, so I've kind of swapped back and forth in saying intrusion detection or intrusion prevention, IDS, IPS, IDPS. I'll use them interchangeably, but there are differences. The primary difference is that when you're talking about an intrusion detection system, its purpose is to alert, not perform actions on behalf of the security administrator. Its purpose is to alert, let you know that it's there. Then if you know that it's there, you can do what you need to do after the fact. Now, you can alert based on predefined rules. Think of like signatures, malware signatures, or something that you have predefined. You can configure IDS based on anomalous behavior or heuristics. Essentially, you have to train the system what is normal activity. You'll have to take a sample and say, okay, well, we're going to record during regular business hours, right? Because when your business is working, normally the way it's supposed to be, that's what you want to define as normal traffic. So you create a baseline of your normal operations of network traffic. Deviations outside of that may throw an alert. The problem with this is false positives. When you're doing heuristics and behavioral types of detection, false positives can be an issue. Predefined rules, you don't have that issue because it either matches the rule and you get an alert or it doesn't. Statistics, another benefit of anomalous detection heuristics is it can also potentially identify 0 days. 0 days, right? There's no known fix. There's no known patch. There's no known defense against an exploit that's out there. An exploit that's going to take advantage of some vulnerability, 0 day. So anomalous types of configurations will help you do that. Statistical configurations will not. But they have far less false positives. So that's detection. Prevention. Well, now we're talking about actions that can be performed on network traffic. Easiest way to think about it is allow it or don't allow it. If you block something at the network level or you're blocking some type of network traffic, the buck really stops there, right? Essentially, if you block traffic coming from a particular source on a particular port, it cannot communicate there. The same thing works with a firewall, but prevention, we're actually talking about blocking. So most modern intrusion detection systems come with the ability to prevent as well. So that's performing actions on the traffic. So detect and then act. You can set it to where, all right, detect but don't act, depending on the type of rule that you're going to set up as well. The best approach is going to be to use a multi configuration approach. Just like when I was talking about layered security and defense in depth, the best is going to be to have some custom configuration that employs multiple different configurations, because in the world of security, one single thing does not solve all the problems. All right. So now what we're talking about is Snort is what I'm actually going to demo today as our intrusion detection, intrusion prevention system. Snort is open source, means any of you can go and download this now for free. Is Linux based. I believe there may be some way to deploy it on Windows. There's, like I was saying before, highly customizable. You can deploy something like Snort, however it is that you need it to be deployed, directly on a host, directly on a network, as a standalone dedicated server that's getting all of the traffic forwarded or mirrored to it for it to analyze. So it really just depends on what you need and what you're trying to do. But if you just want to see how an intrusion detection system can work, Snort might be the thing for you. So I know I've had roommates. A lot of people have had roommates before, right? You have roommates, you all share the network, you have no idea what the heck your roommates are doing. You have no idea what the heck their guests are doing, but everybody's giving away the Wi-Fi, right? So what could you do as a test? Well, maybe you can use something like Snort that will sniff the network and try to use so what I'll talk about the next slide is the types of rules, configurations that you can use that you can tell Snort to look for. But essentially, you can deploy this so that you can start to look for things that might seem weird on your network, right? Because once I started getting roommates, right? At that point, I was already in the industry and working in security stuff. So my security mind was already thinking of, all right, I need to try and administer this network that I have, and it ended up being like a test bed or like a bunch of guinea pigs, right? Because if you think about it, you have a house full of roommates, a bunch of people, you have no idea who is doing what, you don't trust all of the roommates, guests, and people connecting to the Wi-Fi. Well, think about a business, right? A company, they have likely wireless networks that they have their trusted employees connecting to, but even though they have trusted employees connecting to the network, that's not to say that there is not bad guys, people connecting to the network, or trusted employees connecting to the network that are doing things that they shouldn't be, right? So the idea was the same, right? I thought about this in my head. It's like, all right, this can be kind of like a test run for me to see how something like this can work. Because in the world of information security, trust is a big deal, right? You hire an employee, you give him a background check, whatever, you give him the correct access he needs, and all right, he's free to do what he's supposed to do. If he has an elevated privileges or administrative access to things, you have to trust that they will not do something they're supposed to do. Now you can employ things like separation of duties, different software tools, all kinds of stuff like that. But at the end of the day, there's nothing that is going to completely stop the chances of an attack, especially when we're talking about insider stuff. But anyway, back to Snort. So it does pretty much all the things that I talked about, intrusion detection prevention systems prior to this slide. Packet sniffing, protocol analysis, logging, network or host base, and traffic blocking, right? So the big use case for having Snort look around the whole network is to protect the network. But if you are more concerned with a particular host or endpoint, then maybe having a host-based deployment, meaning that you have an intrusion detection system that is dedicated to the host, that is looking directly what the host is doing, not the network. But the best approach is to have both if you really want the most security, network and host-based. And this is their mascot. It's a little pig guy, because Snort, right? Snort. Please do. Yeah, continued stuff here. It is rule-based. Since it's open source, you get a set of community rules that you can use that are supplied by many of the smart people in the industry that contribute to many other open source projects, Snort included. There's also a paid subscriber set of rules. So Snort was purchased by Cisco recently. It was within the last couple years, I believe. So they have a subscriber rule set that gets pushed out real time whenever they need it if you're a paid subscriber through Cisco's program or whatever. But if you're just looking to try this out and see how it works, you probably don't need to pay for rule sets. The community rule sets are pretty good. They're going to look for, I'll show you. They're going to look for a lot of most of the stuff that you would encounter in terms of looking for malicious activity. I won't be able to cover all of the rules, but I'll just kind of show you the types of stuff that it has. So I am going, the demo that I'm going to show you is package-based. Essentially, I'm going to show a deployment of pfSense, which is an open source software that wears many different hats. pfSense can be a router, it could be a firewall, it can do many things. But I have installed the Snort package on this software so that it makes the demo of this a bit easier. Other deployments of Snort is you can have it directly be strictly from the command line. So you'll have to go through some configurations on Linux to get the binaries, compile them, do all the configurations within the files, understand the commands, review the rule sets, all that type of stuff. There's a complete command line based version of this as well, if that's your thing. The first time I was introduced to Snort was in my undergraduate, and it was actually through the command line based version of it. But I figured that it would be easier to just show you the GUI based version of this, but essentially they'd be able to do the same thing. But when you're talking about command line, we're talking about, automation and stuff like that. So a business, if they have, they're trying to save money, then they're not going to want the overhead of using like a GUI. And truthfully, you may not have something like intrusion detection system on something like a router anyway, but that's what I'll show you here not too long. Alrighty. So this is the scenario that I have broken down that I'm going to demo here in a bit. Simple deployment here. I have this as pfSense, which has the Snort package on it, a Kali Linux box, and a Windows machine that is remoting in to pfSense to administer the interface that is pfSense. And so this cloud here, they're on the same network over here. It's a private network. These are all VMs through VirtualBox. Private network here. It's communicating here. I have a mirror of all of the traffic in this network here being sent to this network, which I have set up in Snort to monitor for the stuff that is over in this network. So essentially, set it up to where all of the traffic in this network to the left over here with these these VMs over here is being copied into this network, and Snort is going to be monitoring and looking, detecting for stuff in this network. So why did I do it this way? Well, one of the reasons you may want to have something like an intrusion detection or prevention system on its own dedicated network, or just not have anything else on that network, is when you're talking about large systems, infrastructures that many businesses have to medium to large size, they have a ton of systems. They have a ridiculous amount of network traffic, right? That is a lot of just computing power and resources needed so that all that can perform as smooth as possible. So when you're talking about intrusion detection or intrusion prevention systems, you want to make it so that the work that they do remains largely unobstructed and unaffected by other bandwidth, other stuff going on, right? You don't want there to be a delay in performance or any type of reporting when you're talking about intrusion detection or intrusion prevention systems, right? Because the difference of being able to detect something on time versus not could mean a breach, right? And we don't like breaches. Breaches cost a lot of money. So yeah, this is all, I did say this is all through VirtualBox. This is a private network. This is another network that I also have set up here in this scenario. But the bad guy is found his way on this network over here. He's going to start scanning this network and looking for vulnerabilities, essentially. And we have Snort set up to look for malicious activity. I hardly had to set any custom rules to be able to do that, because the default rules that Snort has, community rules and emerging threat rules, already look for the type of traffic that is going to be produced by most of the tools that you can download today from the internet, from something like Kali Linux, right? Because security tools, stuff that you can get from Kali Linux and all of the other stuff that's out there, it is for researchers, right? Learn how to do certain things, perform certain attacks, learn how to prevent certain attacks, understand the behavior, but inversely, bad guys can use them just the same. So it's out there for both sides to be able to use, which means that something like Snort, an intrusion detection or intrusion prevention system, has the ability to look for the types of stuff that would come from tools that are widespread used, like stuff from Kali Linux, like I just said. All right, so let's see if we can get started. All right, so Kali's running here. All right, so this this is the user interface of pfSense. This is also open source, free to use. I am using this as my home router as well. I have a network appliance that runs this software that serves as my home router. It's my firewall. I'm running Snort on my host network as well, among many other things. I do a lot of troubleshooting from this interface, because most of the routers that people get from Amazon or Best Buy or whatever, you get a little piece of firmware that allows you to do certain things and doesn't allow you to do other things. Well, my hope is that all of you one day become super users and enthusiastic about the security and IT world and want to learn more and practice in your own life to improve the security of the stuff that you do every day, because there's almost no downside to doing that, right? If you're learning something, how to use something in academia or at work that's helping on that front, there's nothing to say that it wouldn't help you in your own front, right? Because you have network at home, your work has a network at work, your school has a network at school. They all need to be protected. So that's all I'll say about that. So if you're doing it this way, so like I said, if you're going to use the command line, you'll go and look up Snort documentation. It's very, very thorough. You just have to be familiar with Linux, how to navigate the CLI basically, and know how to read directions well, and you'll be able to get it done, I believe. But here, package manager, available packages, you just search Snort and download it. And it's as simple as that. It'll show up down here in services. I have it running right now. So this is the network that it's actually listening on that I showed you from that diagram. This is the interface that you will get on this service. So let's talk about this a little bit. So first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to tell Snort where it should be looking for traffic, because as intrusion detection, intrusion prevention system, it needs to know where to look for things. So that's what you're going to do first. What I've done here is like I said, I mirrored the traffic from the private network onto a separate network that Snort is going to listen to. There is a lot of configuration options in here that I really didn't need to mess with for this demo, just because all I'm doing is showing that Snort has the ability to detect and even prevent basic types of things like vulnerability scanning, web applications, which is what I'll do. So the big thing, you're going to need to configure the interface, enable the interface. You should probably give it a description as well. Enable packet captures if you want to have that put in the TCP dump file, which is TCP dump is a native Linux utility that essentially will capture network traffic. And I have this set up in non-blocking mode right now, just because I didn't want to prevent things. I just wanted to detect. But the option to block is there. Send alerts to the firewall logs, don't need to do that. But if you were going to check that box, you would go to system, status, system logs, firewall, and you would see Snort pop up in here. These are the firewall log stuff. All right, so rules. Rules. So when you first have this package, it's going to have no rules active because command line, I believe command line and this package needs to be able to phone home to be able to get the rules that it needs. So you need to update this so that it can have the rules that it needs. Let's see. I want to clear. I have the ability to clear all this so that I can show you. Move all these reset current. No, I don't want to do that. That's okay. Well, that's okay if I can't clear these logs because I've already ran this demo right before. So that's what this is here, but I'll show you what I've done again for that reason. Okay, so actually alerts. There we go. Clear. There we go. That's what we want to do. Clear. Interfaces here. Rules. These are the rules. Categories. Okay, this is also what I want to show you here. These are like individual rule categories. The list is long here, but it's even longer depending on how deep you want to go into this. Default rules, like I said, it's going to cover most of the stuff that's out there today. I know, so one of the first times when I told you I had used Snort in my undergraduate, right? There are like default rules in there that will look for like adult sites and stuff, right? So imagine running something like that. You have a bunch of roommates and get alerts on that. Anyway, so use IPS policy as well. So this I'm going to leave. I left this checked, and connectivity here. This part, it's kind of an easy mode, like I said. By default, It's in connectivity, but as you go down here from balance to security to max detect, it pretty much tells the Snort engine to be super duper strict about detecting things. So the good side of that is it will detect a lot of things. Bad side is it may create a lot of noise, right? Because what I have seen, right, in deploying Snort in my own home is it'll alert on things that it has a rule on, but it's not necessarily malicious. So it would really be up to you to understand the traffic that is coming into and out of your network to truly determine if it is malicious. And that's what I was talking about before at the beginning of this. Identification. If you don't know what you're looking for, you aren't going to be able to perform the necessary action. So I left this at the lowest state. You go up here is more strict in terms of how you want Snort to behave. Okay, so this is what that was not the alerts, that was the rules. These are alerts. I just cleared the log right here. So we can probably go ahead and run the demo now. So over here, I'm just going to use Nikto. So this scenario, I've done an in-map scan on the whole network. It was revealed that there was port 80 open on a particular host on this network, which I am going to run Nikto against Web Application Vulnerability Scanner, which is pretty much just going to probe for a lot of common vulnerabilities for web applications. Just Nikto H, and that's IP is 192.168.56.10, I believe. It's gonna do its thing for a second. Didn't take too long last time I did this also, so. All right, it's done. Let's go and take a look now. So the administrator is now going to go look at the Snort logs and see if there's anything weird going on. It was empty. Now look, there's a ton of stuff that has been flagged on here that Snort was able to detect. Now, some of this stuff is not malicious. Some of this stuff is malicious. So let's try and point out, because I know that this is the Kali machine. I know it is. The source came from here. The destination is actually pfSense. So pfSense itself is just FreeBSD. This is the console that you get. Very, very lightweight. The management interface that you see here is being accessed from another device on the network. So double decoding attack, right? That looks pretty malicious. So you're an administrator, you'd view this, you'd maybe want to start blocking this this host altogether. Forget that, forget just like, hey, this rule particular the port or whatever. Now if you're looking at logs like this and you see all of this is coming from one or two particular hosts, you're going to want to block the host altogether, even if it was on your own network. Like, think about a corporation, because you want to isolate it and stop what it's doing. Web root directory traversal. Essentially, it's probing to find what the directory structure is of the web application. Because if an attacker is able to traverse something like a directory on a web application, may be able to find sensitive stuff in your directories there. So yeah, there's more stuff here. I could have done, something that was even more direct, but I just wanted to be able to show you how an intrusion detection system can work with Snort, and that was pretty quick. As soon as I was done, I went over here, it flagged all of it. And we can even look at the timestamps here. 4843, 4843, 4842. The time zone of this, I forget what the time zone is, but it was all in real time though, because Snort is actively running right now, and you can verify that. Status, running. It's a service, so it is running and it is actively looking at things. So yeah, it didn't take too much to do this, and you could do the same thing with the command line version as well. You can just have this sitting here on your network and then watch it go as you try and do things. All right, and that wraps that up. Let's go back over here. So Varonis, talk about where I found those statistics. If you want some really interesting statistics, this is going to be a really good place to go related to cybersecurity stuff. The Snort website itself, very good documentation there. Kali Linux, the same. It is the go-to for many things. I've been using this since it was called Backtrack. I forget how long ago that was, but I definitely enjoy the opportunity to use this system and tools in demonstrations like this and on my own time as well. And in pfSense, also very good documentation there. All of this stuff is free. All of this stuff is open source and available to you to go and learn about if you're interested in. And that wraps it up. That's all I've got. You still covering me for questions, David, or?
Yes, I can. Let's see. We had a few questions on your technical setup of the network. Were you using a span port, or did you just have Snort kind of installed as a package on top of everything?
Snort was installed as a package that was listening on a span port.
Gotcha. So you had to do a few steps to set that up.
Yeah, I could have just had Snort looking on the same network as the attacker, but I wanted to make it be like a more realistic deployment, right? Because I was saying that something like Snort, you're gonna want to make sure that it's unobstructed and has dedicated resources to do its job on its own network potentially.
Okay, and do you recommend that people use the preventative ruleset with an IDS type of system?
It really depends on what your requirements are. If it's something that is, company, private, or sensitive type of data classified to that nature, you're probably going to want to add something that's a bit more strict that has more blocking, right? If you have a web server or a file server that is hosting very sensitive data, you may need to have more blocking. Maybe if you're hosting a public DNS, maybe you don't want to be blocking as much because you get paid based on people using your DNS. So maybe you just want to have the detection portion. Does that answer your question? Hopefully, that's the question.
I think so. I see a lot of interest in SIMs, which are security incident event management software for ingesting logs. What is your SIM of choice, Javon? And I guess a lot of folks are asking if they should be playing around with Security Onion if they're a beginner to something like an IDS.
I'm going to be 100% honest with you and tell you that I've never even used Security Onion, right? I don't know everything. I wish I did, but I do not. But getting experience with SIM is definitely going to be important. I don't have any particular tool of choice that I use. It's a good question though, because businesses use SIMs, right?
Definitely.
Most of the time, intrusion detection, intrusion prevention systems are not standalone, right? They work with other things, right? As maybe unified threat management or even a SIM, right? Because as a business, the more you can get out of, like you get one tool that does a bunch of stuff that may be better than just having something that is just running standalone.
Do you have any sizing related guidance for running Snort on a pfSense virtual machine?
Well, that's what I was doing right here. So if you were going to use Snort, like in its own dedicated VM, you are going to want to make sure that you have a good amount of CPUs and RAM as it's running the engine that it has to detect stuff. I really don't know what the resource requirements are for the package itself, but my guess is that it's streamlined, right? Because it was a package developed for pfSense, essentially meaning that it's not meant to bog everything down. It's probably stripped down, right? Probably stripped down with some stuff to make it so it's not going to affect the performance of everything, because pfSense is really lightweight.
Right. And Rodney was asking, were all of these tools installed in virtual machines on one physical host computer?
Yep.
Very nice. It's amazing how much free stuff there is out there for learning cybersecurity these days.
I like
And
free.
I love free too. And sometimes I think as a beginner, it's like tool overload, right? Because you have one person is telling you learn security onion, and another person is like, no, you should learn, Splunk instead. And I think we have a lot of that these days.
Yeah, and I earlier in my times, in the industry, I ran into that a lot. And there's no really one answer. The best thing is to get familiar with the stuff that you're most interested in.
Agreed.
If you want to try, if you're interested in intrusion detection, prevention systems, you're interested in password cracking tools, well, then use as many of those tools as you can so that you can get familiar with the process and different implementations of it. That's what I did. It's like I'm going to use a bunch of different stuff to see how they work.
Yeah, and I really encourage people not to get tool anxiety. If you've
Yeah.
learned one SIM in depth, then don't count yourself out. Chances are the other SIM is fairly similar in many regards, and that's my opinion on that. Kurt Lenz had a question: is what happens on the attacker's end when you block their attack in progress? Do they know that they've been detected, or does their process just halt?
So if we're talking about blocking at the network level, essentially the communication just is not going to work. Think about like firewall, right? There's not going to be an alert sent to them unless it's the security administrator sending a message to them or something directly. But if it's blocking at the network level, well, you're blocking things like things that are related to the header of traffic, right? So source, destination, port information, stuff like that.
Yeah, I see a question from James Roth asking about should he be using VirtualBox instead of VMware because he saw you use VirtualBox, and I can take that real quick. Both of those virtualizers, they actually both use what are called OVAs, and those are full images of computers that you can just import into them. And so really it's just preference. I think VirtualBox is a bit simpler and easier myself, but if you've gotten used to one of them, then I don't think there's a need to stress about switching unless you have a compatibility issue somewhere.
Yeah, I have both. I have VMware Workstation Pro, which is pretty much the parallel of VirtualBox. It really is a preference. The big difference is going to be that if you are using vSphere, vCenter, and have VMware set of tools to where you are using VMware's software for virtual infrastructure, well, VMware Workstation Pro is going to integrate with everything related to that. So you have the whole management console there. All right, I've got my list of VMs right here. All right, I want to go into this one and start managing it. It's all synchronized because it's all VMware. With VirtualBox, not necessarily, but VirtualBox is really easy to use. And I've been using VirtualBox forever. So that's why I still use VirtualBox.
That's a good point, Javon. Yeah, VMware has some commercial products that you can license that really scale up aggressively if you're having a large setup. So that's a good point, actually. I don't think I would ever scale up VirtualBox like crazy if I had tons of systems.
Nah, probably not.
Although you can.
Yep.
I've seen some crazy stuff in Linux. I think we've covered a lot of the questions. I did see some questions about the installation of Snort earlier, and I just recommend if you're going to install this, I just do it on a compatible Ubuntu LTS and use sudo apt install, and that's going to save you a ton of pain, in my experience. Or as Javon did, he loaded Splunk's package into pfSense into that. So that's another great way to do that. Okay, well, I think that's all the questions. I think I got it covered. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Quite the turnout this evening. I hope you had a good time absorbing all that information and checking out that IDS there. And thank you, Javon, for stopping by and presenting on this topic. And for the rest of you, if you're interested in, if you're considering a career change into cybersecurity, I really encourage you to come check out Ops 101 from Code Fellows, and that's a live virtually instructed course. Here's a promo link. We've got a class coming up on June 13th. We usually do these full day classes. They're totally beginner friendly, don't need any skills or special tools. Just bring yourself and your computer. We'd love to have you. So I believe that's a half price off discount there. So do check that out. The link is in the chat today. Otherwise, yeah, thanks for presenting, Javon. Great topic. And thanks for joining us, everybody. This recording will be uploaded to CSNP's YouTube channel if you missed the beginning. Otherwise, stay tuned. Follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, Eventbrite even, for upcoming webinars just like this. And in August, I've even got one covering log analysis with Splunk. So do check those out. We've got plenty more to share with you. Yeah, all right, Javon. Yeah, thanks so much. And we'll see you, everybody. Have a good night.